In another video, we have looked at how to upload data to a REST API. And in this video, we're going to look at the direct opposite. We're going to reach out to a server, get that JSON data, get that back to our app, deserialize the JSON, and show that in a collection view. Without further ado, let's have a look. To show you how this all works, I'm going to use a file new Xamarin.Forms application as with my other videos. And for this video, we're going to have a look at communicating with a web API and get data from it in JSON format. So I've got another video on uploading data, which should appear on your screen right now, or find it in the video description. So if you want to do uploads, then find that one. And if you want to download and get your JSON data, keep watching this one. So here we are going to update the UI, and we are going to use a collection view here. So if you haven't worked with Xamarin.Forms for a while, you want to use the collection view now and not so much the list view. So we're going to start working with the collection view. And of course, here we're going to update the title to say get JSON data sample, something like that. So we're going to save that, and we'll see that updating in a little bit. So the other thing I did for this project is in our solution, I added a little server project here, which is just a file new ASP.NET Core application, which is a API. So I've got one controller. It generates a little bit of template code for us. So here in the controller, we have the weather forecast controller. And what you can see happening in here is it has a couple of summaries hard-coded. And then here in the get endpoint, it will just generate a couple of random weather forecasts, so 5, and it will return that for us. So, you know, this is a nice piece of data that resembles probably a lot of the scenarios that you are looking at. So I'm just going to stick with this. Let's actually go over to a tool called Postman, which lets you create some HTTP calls with get and post and all the things. You got all the options to create HTTP calls with this, but we're just going to do a get to our localhost and then the weather forecast endpoint. So let's send that, and we should be seeing here the results that are coming back are JSON, and you can see it's a collection of 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, I don't know, of these results. So it has a date, it has the temperature in Celsius and Fahrenheit, and it has a little summary thing. So, you know, nothing too crazy, but this should be enough to get us started and have a look at how we can incorporate that in our app. We then switch back to Visual Studio. Here we go. Let's get that emulator here back. So let's see, this is the server code, so this just works. We're not going to touch this. I'm going to assume that you have a little bit of knowledge on ASP.NET, and so I'm showing you this with this little server project, but of course it could be in real life that you do not have the code to the server that you're connecting to, so don't worry about it. Just, you know, go into Postman or even your browser, as long as it's a regular GET request, get that data out of there. And, you know, you should be able to find out what the data is and play with that. Hopefully, whenever it's a service like in a business environment, you probably have some kind of specification, or you can at least contact the developer of that service to give you a little bit more information. In fact, let's go back to Postman for a little, because here in our solution, we have this weather forecast object. So this is what we can use in code. So here you can see kind of like the same properties. And ideally, what you would do is take this object, put it into a library that you can share between your server project and your app projects. So, you know, then you have just this single object that you can use for all of these projects, and you don't have to rewrite them. But I'm going to show you a little other trick, because if you do not have access to the code of the server, then that is not something very useful. So let's go back to Postman for a little, and we're going to copy this JSON here. So I'm going to select all, copy that, and I'm going to go to a browser window here, which has open app.quickttype.io. You can find that link in the video description. And what you can do here on the left is give your object a name. So this is my object, and we can just paste in here our JSON. And what it will do is it will generate this class for us. So that is Pretty cool. If you're on Visual Studio 2019 for Windows, then this is also a functionality that is built in. I think under the edit menu, there is a option for like paste special or something, and there you have an option to paste classes from JSON. So you just have to have that JSON on your clipboard and it will paste a C# class for you. And I think you can do the same thing from XML. So that is pretty cool as well. But this website works for all the things. So you can just paste in some JSON here and it will generate this class for you. Of course, you probably want to, do some things. The partials are probably not necessary, but now we can just take this code and we can go back to our Visual Studio, go in here to our solution. Let's stop running here for a second and go into our shared Xamarin.Forms project. And I'm going to add a new class and I'm going to also call this weather forecast. There we go. Create that and I'm going to paste in the code that I just got. So partials not needed. And this should be the weather forecast. So just import this Newtonsoft JSON thing in here. Oh, I don't have JSON installed. So let's quickly add that NuGet package here. Manage NuGet packages. It should be right on top because it's still the most popular package to date. So Newtonsoft JSON, let's just add that to our little project here. And if you're using probably newer versions of .NET, then JSON might be built in by now. So that is pretty cool too. And I'm going to IntelliSense solve this by just adding the using Newtonsoft JSON here at the top, or at least that is the theory. There we go. So let's save that. And now you can see, this is the kind of like the exact same object that we got in the server side. So it created this as a datetime offset. So it shouldn't really matter, but let's make this a datetime as well. So there we go. And what are the other ones? Longs and ints. So, it can't really figure out all the types correctly, but, as long as they're kind of compatible and you know what kind of values you're expecting from the server, then you should be good. Okay, so we can now use this weather forecast and let's go to our little main page. So we had a collection view and I'm not going to confuse you with any data binding in this sample. I try to keep it as simple as possible. So I'm just going to give this collection view a name. Forecasts, let's call it like that. So we will have a field in our code behind that we can reference this collection view with. And let's actually go to our code behind of the main page here. And in our main page, we are going to get this data. So what we want to do is probably create some kind of new method to do this, or maybe let's add a button in our main page as well. So typically you probably might want to load some data whenever you load your application, but in this case we are going to do a button clicked. There we go, button clicked, and we are going to get our forecasts with this button. So what you want to do is get a HTTP client. So HTTP client, because that is the thing that we are using to communicate with anything basically. And you have to add the right using here. So using system.net.http, and then it knows how to handle this. So here we go. Typically, probably whenever you have like a better architecture for your app, then this probably is all handled by some kind of service class that is responsible for communicating with the external service. At the very minimum, you want to put this HTTP client on your page level or on your class level and not instantiate a new HTTP client all the time, of course. But this is a piece of sample code, so I don't care. And for the HTTP client, we are going to basically say get async, or we can say get string async. So here we go. We are just going to get the JSON string. Again, this is like a very simple example, because this might not be the most efficient way to get the data, because whenever you get back like this huge string, then you might maybe want to stream your data a little bit. So if you're expecting like big chunks of data coming back, then you might want to look into optimization there. But this is just to get you started on the idea on how to get this data from a server. And what we want to do here is add the endpoint that we want to communicate communicate to. So I think that I see happening a lot of times is when we go back to Postman and we copy this URL here. This should be the endpoint, right? Because it's localhost, so we're getting our data from there. Our host is running on the localhost, and that's where we should get it. But that's not the way it entirely works, at least not for like the local development, because whenever you run localhost for Postman, Postman and the server are now running on the same machine, which is this Mac machine. But whenever you start running on our simulator, then whenever you try to reach localhost, then localhost is suddenly this iPhone 12. That is not something that you want, so you should figure out what your local IP address is on the network. So one way to do that on your Mac is just by going here to this Wi-Fi icon and open the network settings, or here to your machine settings and open the system preferences and go to the network icon right here, and then select connection that is active right now. And here we can see that my IP address for this machine is 192.168.1.77. So whenever you are on a local network, then the IP address will probably start with 192.168 or 10.0.0. That's typically the two address ranges that are machines on a local network. So you have to make sure that whenever you test this on a physical iOS or Android device, you want to make sure that those are on the same network to test these things. Typically, you're probably going to communicate with a service that is available on the internet. So just put in the domain name there and you should be good to go as well. But whenever you do like local development like this, you probably want to do get this in here and paste this in there. And the other thing that we probably are going to worry about, because iOS and Android have this very strict, which is a good thing, strict policy now of you have to communicate over HTTP and HTTPS. So I'm going to communicate over HTTP here. And actually, let's find out what the right port is for that, because that's probably going to be different. So for that, we're going to go to our server project, our properties, and look into the launch settings. So here you can see all kinds of settings for our server project, and here you can see the application URL is for the HTTPS is this port, and HTTP is 3333. So let's validate with Postman that actually works. So just do the HTTP here and do 3333, send. And see, there we go. That doesn't work for some reason. So what I'm going to do is, this is not running anyway. So what I'm going to do is in our settings for the server. Oh, that's why it's not running. So I basically answered my own question. That's probably why this is not working, because the server is not running at this time. So I'm going to assume that this endpoint works. Well, just, because I'm going to test this, and this is a little bit of sample code, I'm just going to remove this HTTPS endpoint here. It's quite a hassle to make your iOS simulator and Android emulator work with like local self-signed HTTPS certificates. So you probably want to do this, just connect to your HTTP endpoint. In the video about uploading something to a server, I'm explaining how to get around the restrictions on your iOS simulator and Android emulator. So I'm going to put the links in the video description if you need that to overcome these restrictions. Again, let me emphasize that the best option to do is just make sure that you can actually test over HTTPS also for your local development. But if you cannot do that, if that's too much of a hassle, then at least make sure that you do not put these restrictions or disabling these restrictions to connect to HTTPS in your production app. That should be something that is only in your debugging version, because else it will pose a security risk. So watch out for that. Now let's finish our code here first. So with this, we are getting actually this is async. So I'm going to have to put in a wait here and async there. So there we go. And then our result string should come up in this variable, the result JSON. And what we need to do then is create a new variable with result forecasts, and that will be a JSON convert. So it doesn't know that yet because we are not using JSON here. Deserialize, and we can say deserialize object, and this is going to be a weather forecast array, right? Because we got a collection. So you can also make this a list or whatever, you know, it knows to deserialize to. So this can be anything. And it wants to know what string it needs to deserialize from. So this is going to be the result JSON. There we go. And now it should, this variable should hold our result forecast. So first you get the string from the server. I need to change this into this one for HTTP. And then we are going to deserialize that in JSON. And now we have in here our actual C# objects that we can use. Then in the forecast, so this is our collection view, we can say item source is result forecasts, because, you know, this just takes a collection, so an array, a list, or observable collection if you're using MVVM and that kind of stuff. This should be all to actually show our forecasts. So let's just run our applications and see if that actually works. So you might notice that I have multiple startup projects here. I have another video on how to set that up, so it should appear on your screen, or find it in the video description below, so you know how to do that as well. For now, just sit back and watch the magic do its work. Whenever I press the play button here, it starts coming up, and it will launch both the server and the iOS simulator with our new app. So the thing that is probably going to happen is that you will see like the 2 string versions of our weather forecast apps. So here is the browser's launch with some new JSON that you can see. So let's switch back. And here we don't see anything, which is kind of interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, so I think, so we had to, of course, push the button first, and we don't see the button because I didn't give that any text. So let's do that now. Load forecasts, there we go, save that, and with hot reload you can see it updates automatically, so that is very cool. And now when I click load forecasts, it gives me a exception because it could not connect to the server. Okay, so that's interesting. Let's continue running this, and let's go into Postman and see why that is. Okay, because it does actually get something. HTTP localhost 3333. Oh, so I know what's going on. For our server project, we also need to specify that it listens to outside connections. What we should do here, I think, is change this to 0000. There we go. So not just localhost. Now it should also listen to like connections from the outside. Instead of just only things that are happening on localhost. So whenever you are doing this kind of development, then yeah, you might want to do that. And here we go. Now I've clicked the load forecasts, and yeah, you can see that this shows only the kind of C#2 string on your objects. So that is not really what we want to see, of course, but you know, we get the results. They actually are loaded from our endpoint, so that is pretty cool. Okay, so we're done with this configuration here. And so what we need to do for that is specify a data template. So what we want to do here is CollectionView dot. I'm going to quickly go over this with the data templates just to show you the result. If you're interested in a little bit more about data templates, item templates, how that works, please let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to make another video on that. Just for now, just watch the magic happen. And here we go, data template, and I should be able to, whoops, specify a label here and give that a text with a binding we need to do then. And I'm going to, for instance, show the summary here. Close that binding. Let's make this a little bit more extensive then while we're here anyway. So let's make this a stack layout. So basically what you're doing here is you're specifying a template for like each record that is in this collection view that's in our JSON collection. And I'm just going to, you know, you can do all kinds of fancy designs, but I'm going to do a stack layout with 2 labels, and I'm going to get the temperature in Celsius because you know, I live in Europe. That's the only thing that I understand. So here we go. And then when I rerun this, then let's find out if this actually is the thing that we want to see here. So here we go, our app comes up, it shows me the browser again. So let's switch back to our Visual Studio and Simulator. And whenever I load this now, you can see that it applied this template to each of the items. And now we have the summary: scorching, freezing, scorching, hot, mild, just some random things that are coming back from our endpoint. So this is the way that you want to get data from a web API, from a REST endpoint, and show them in a collection view in your app. So this video was a bit messy. There were some things going wrong, but I intentionally left that in so you see how all these things work together. That is not really polished, so that whenever you run in one of these scenarios, you know how to debug it. So I hope you found this useful. Let me know in the comments what you think. Should it be more polished? Should it be a little bit more raw? I'm curious for your feedback as always. Thank you for sticking with me. Let me know also in the comments what you want to see next, because this was also a request from someone who wanted to see this. Like this video. Please like it if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll be seeing you for my next video.